Welcome to the Refreshing Leadership Podcast with me, Maya Goodker, and specifically welcome to our August Refresh series. This month, I am resharing some of our most impactful episodes centered around the theme of rest, rejuvenation, being a little bit more dreamy. If you're a long-time listener, there's a chance you might be hearing one of these episodes for the second time. This is actually good news. When I listen to an episode, a podcast episode, the second time, that's when I actually integrate it into my life. The first time, I'm listening at a cognitive, intellectual level, getting familiar with the concept, which is of course super helpful. So if you're listening to this for the first time, my hope is that all of the episodes this month will help you embrace a refreshing summer, whatever that means for you. I personally am taking a much needed creative pause, and I encourage you to join me in your own version of that. I look forward to connecting with you in the second week of September. And until then, I hope these episodes help you to really embrace your own refreshing August. Let's dive in.
Outdoor intelligence is essentially having an experience of knowing more when we're outside. So during the day, you and I sit at our desks and these facts and stuff hits our brain, and in our brain, everything happens. When we step over the doorstep outside, into the outdoors, into nature, something really different happens because our bodies and our brains engage much more together. So actually our brain just works much better, is better referenced, and we're embodying that experience of new thinking, if you like. And then more than that, we also have these moments outside of connecting with nature, and there's an awe in that. And there's also a connection with life beyond the human world, and if you like, a collective intelligence. So this is all stuff that our ancestors knew. It's how they sought wisdom. They walked out onto the land. And we don't do it that way anymore, but I think there's lots of really good stuff we can get from doing that. And I came into this work myself because nearly 4 years ago, I had an extreme experience in nature, which enabled me just to know a lot more about myself and the work that I had to do in the world. And that was in a process called a vision fast, which is a 4-day process alone in the wild.
What's that called? A vision fast?
A vision fast. Some people call it a vision quest.
Oh,
Yeah.
wow. Where was that?
So I did it on a fell in the Lake District at the end of September.
Was that your sort of a pivotal moment for you in interacting with this subject?
Yes, in the previous few years, I'd started walking quite a bit. I got a dog and then I just walked further and further, started doing walking holidays. I did a swim trekking holiday as well. So I was kind of pushing my body a bit. And there was sort of more of an adventure psychology paradigm to it then. And then it moved into this slightly different thing where I realized that I came to experience the world differently, myself differently, and my insight, my intuition much differently when I had kind of let go the trappings of daily life, if you like, and really went out there.
Wow. Okay, it's great to hear where some of the birth of this concept came from, but it obviously, like with all of these things, there's no one single moment, is there? There's a sort of a build up, and that's what it sounds like happened here. And, when I talk about the golden hour, it can be any time of day really, but often it is the early hours or the later hours. I mean, the actual concept of golden hour, it's that perfect lighting, I think, for the visual arts and things. But the idea of a golden hour is that not all hours are created equally, and that in some ways we need to be quite intentional about lifting ourselves out of the kind of automatic and the normal ways of being. So do you think walking outside is a golden hour, can be a golden hour?
Absolutely. And for me, that's at the core of my practice in the way that I work, and I source new work. I am creative in my work. So this morning I got up, I've got 5 lists as long as my arm. My priority is to go out for an hour before I come to sit at my desk. My time outside first thing in the morning is, I have like a double golden hour, right? It's like a double yolked egg. I have my walking where ideas surface. I'm quite creative when I'm walking. Lots of stuff comes to me and I get a bit zen and I feel very connected with my work and what I'm here to do. And then I come back to my desk and I then am often writing, creating. I offer programs. I'm putting together content. I'm putting together material that I want to share with the world. And so being really intentional about that is so helpful. And if you like, the physicality of my first golden hour, if you like, the one that I spent out, means that, I come into my work in a very fresh and alive and energized and awake space, if you like.
So actually what you're saying is that walk does two things. In itself, it is when you're out there, you are often having more creative thoughts and you are embodied. So for those reasons, it constitutes a golden hour, but then it also prepares you in the best possible way for when you do then sit down at your desk and you're perhaps able to have that hour at your desk or more be so much more powerful and be in that sense a golden hour because you have done that wonderful embodied outdoor time. So I love that double yolked egg golden hour. Mine will involve going to pick up a coffee, and that forms part of that ritual. Then you sit down at the desk, and then in my case I try and tackle those most tricky tasks, and then you feel really great afterwards. And I have mentioned this to you before, but I want to just put it out there that I'm a huge fan of walking and I'm very religious about doing that. But I will often have headphones on. I'll be listening to podcast after podcast. I'll be listening to audiobooks. I'll be sending a few voice messages to my friends. It's quite a hectic time. And I know when I've said this to you before, I've seen the expression on your face of, Maya, come on. This is not outdoor intelligence. So what I'm looking for here is a few simple steps for me to take a portion of that time, because that time is important to me and the way I use it and, picking up new ideas from listening. But what would you recommend someone like me who's quite wedded to their routine? What would you recommend to get that bit more out of outdoor time and access that in outdoor intelligence?
Okay, let's not mess around here. You've got outside, fantastic, all really good. And clearly, what you're describing from your practice is that you're waking up your body, you're waking up your mind, and you're processing some content. And all of that will be better for you getting outside. So I think great stuff. To move a bit beyond that, if you want to, you might not want to move beyond that. You might be fine with that. All good stuff. Let's not knock it. If you want to move a bit beyond that to start to really have a different sense of awareness and insight, you might want to experiment just with having a little bit of your walk time where you choose to walk not thinking, not deliberately thinking. There's a real myth here that intelligence means we've got to be out there thinking even harder than we would at our desks. But to take the podcast out of your ears, to put your phone on airplane mode and just walk, noticing what's around you. And it's my experience talking with many people about this, that what happens then is that our mind's quite busy, but when we notice what's around us, the busyness drops away. And what comes is the things that want to be paid attention to in your life, in your work, and ideas about how to respond to those, if you like. And there's probably a kind of place a bit further out from there, which is also, some people would call it a more spiritual place, a place where you can have a greater sense of purpose and the way that you want to engage with the world, like a real proper gold nugget. I'm going to call it thinking space, but it's slightly more nuanced than thinking. It's almost like a being place. It's like, what's for me to do here in this time that I have, right? So that's all there as a possibility for you. It might not appeal to you,
Yeah. And definitely I'm bringing it here because I am ready, perhaps in deep lockdown I wasn't, and those circumstances were specific, but, I am ready. And the thing is, spring is that time of year where you can't not notice the surroundings that you're in because there's just too much going on. The birds are loud and, there's so many different colors and the sky is bright. So, it's almost, I always like to be seasonal about things. And if there was any season, I think, to go out and start noticing, it's probably as easy as it possibly could be right now. you know. So I think what I'm quite committed to doing, and I do this, and I'm sort of joking a little bit when I was describing that sort of caricature of myself, but definitely I do find myself turning off the podcast because you kind of think, oh, what was all this in my ear? I just want to hear the real noises. So I do that, and I think I'm just going to be quite conscious about that. And I really like this question that you have, which is just, what am I noticing? And then what was the other thing you said? What am I here to do? I think that's a great question from a sort of
Yeah,
purpose.
what is my work that I'm here to do in the world? So amongst Indigenous people, what happened was the young people of the village would be sent out in quest to hear the wisdom of the land about what was theirs to do, right? Okay. And then they'd come back. So the whole point isn't to go out and see beautiful bluebells and fluffy squirrels, whatever it is. That's not the point. The point is to have a connected experience when we're out so that when we come back knowing ourselves and the world around us, not the squirrel or the bluebell, but knowing, okay, my clarity for today is this. And
Mm,
it's something about presence and it's something about what we know in our head, but that's all mixed up together. We come back presencing ourselves in our work differently
yeah.
is my experience. And the experience I've had working with groups of coaches in these programs that I run is that they come back changed. They come back saying, wow, I had no idea about these things. But my dear Maya, it requires a little bit of quiet to hear, right? It requires, and there is some really good research around sending people out with a phone, without a phone, and how that impacts our brain.
Mm,
One phone call in a 40-minute walk radically impacts our brain and our ability to recall what we read before we went out. It's a real game changer. It's a real game changer in the kind of attention that we can have in the moment.
well, there you raise almost a very practical consideration because you know that I am interested in matters related to digital well-being and distraction and things like that. I'm really aware of those, but there's also a safety thing. So you can tell me whether this is, valid or not, or is it an excuse? But as a female going out, then into the
Mm.
woods and all of that, I take some comfort in having a phone with me. I would love to say I don't need it. I'm sort of superhuman, but I almost feel like I could sort of end up finding myself exposed, I guess. Do you have any thoughts about that? Has that come up before or?
It's a real concern, safety, and we all have to make our own judgments about
Mm,
that because it depends on our own relationship with being outside, but also where we're walking and who
mm,
else we tend to come across there. And also our instincts, for how sharp our instincts are about what we meet when we're out. I'm not suggesting that anyone go out without a phone at all, but I suggest the phone is on airplane mode.
mm.
So we can make an emergency call if we want to, but there's not that kind of ping, 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 or we're even seeing the little cues on screen that, oh, yeah, WhatsApp, another 7 messages,
Yep.
right?
Yeah.
So it's a subtle difference.
It's a subtle difference, but to be honest, you've answered it there. And sometimes, and hopefully this is helpful for the listeners as well, that you think you've got an excuse because you haven't just said it out loud and someone hasn't troubleshooted it for you. It's sometimes a small change, and it can just completely change the way we then interact when we go out. So that's really helpful. Thank you. And you've described some of the impacts that your coaches have, that your coaches experience as a result of going through your programs. I'm curious, have you applied this when you work with leaders? A lot of the people listening to this are people like my clients who are in busy organizational roles, and they will then be faced with a day of back-to-back Zooms. And to the extent that we can minimize those, we do. We've previously had a session on how to run great meetings. But I'm interested for their benefit. What are some of the things that they've experienced as a result of embracing the outdoor intelligence more?
Sightedness, being able to see things more clearly. So that would be the clear thing. This is quality thinking time. This is quality, getting back, getting close to yourself and knowing your priorities. And that, for me, that really speaks to the golden hour piece as well. It's like, what's on top here? What is not the most kind of drama-y, urgent thing that needs? What is the single most important thing I have to do today? This is
Mm.
like a macro for this. This is a practice that can take us into that on a daily or weekly basis.
Yeah.
What is my absolute point of most impact this week?
Yeah. And that fits so much with what my clients say that they need more of, because they're saying, I don't have time for the strategic thinking. I don't always have time for the more visionary thinking and clarity. And so, what a great thing to be able to dip into. Have you noticed times of day? Have you experimented yourself with, we talked about the morning routine, but have you experimented with outdoor intelligence at other times of day, and how has that been for you?
Look, I'm a morning person, so morning's going to work for me. We're all different. And we also, when we're time poor, we grab our moments when we can. So if I have any choice that I can walk rather than get in the car or to do something walking, I will always take that choice because I'm privileged enough to be able to do that. But we just fit it in when we can. I think, you have to be pragmatic with it. I was working with a group of partners from a large consultancy at Canary Wharf, and one of them told me that he left home. He did something like 12 billable hours every day, and he used to leave home. He had young kids. He'd leave home early, and he would act as if he was going to the tube station. But actually, what he did was he walked to the tube station 3 stops down the line. So he got some thinking space on the way to work, because when he got into work, it was relentless and he knew he needed it. So he kind of made his, what's that expression, making a purse out of a sow's ear or something. He made his golden hour, not
Mm.
by exactly deceit, but by sleight of hand. And he absolutely treasured it.
Yeah, but it almost sounds like he paid himself first and therefore was able to serve better as a result. And I think when you are highly externally accountable in certain roles, or if that's just part of your personality, it can be easy not to do that. And yet, by doing so, as you've described, you not only benefit from the clarity and vision when you're doing it, but then when you do sit down, you bring so much more to your work. So it has all those benefits. I think sometimes it's just nice to hear them out loud. And as you were describing that example, I sort of hear these two pieces. I hear the walking piece, which I am a huge already, as you can see, I'm very much signed into that. And then I hear this sort of more outdoor intelligence. When I see your imagery, I think of the leaves and I think of how they're all working together and the systems of nature and that part. And I worry about, those of us that are in more kind of urban environments, and we're just not going to see some of, that extensive nature. Do if I said to you, look, Fee, all I've got is time for a 20-minute walk around the block, I'm going to see a lot of pavement. Of course, I'm going to see some trees as well. Do you think I can access outdoor intelligence even in that?
Absolutely. There were always natural systems. Like, it's not about the perfect kind of rural image of a budding
Mm.
beech tree. Look at the sky. We have cloud systems moving through the whole time. One big, beautiful tree in a city, some tree roots coming out of the pavement. This is all nature. The research shows if we can do the deeper nature dive, we can get more insight, we have change consciousness, we can access the systemic intelligence more easily. But all of these things are in a continuum. So we take our moments when we can in the city, we get out when we can, and that moment is connected with the slightly longer walk we're able to take at the weekend, or maybe the day walk we take when we're on holiday. So it's all good.
Yeah, I love the idea of thinking about different horses for courses, right? So different times when you can access, and it doesn't mean it's all or nothing. There was another term that you used there, which I think we've both now used a few times, and I'm wondering if we define it, which is systemic intelligence. What do we mean by that?
Well, you've described it when you say you think of the images, that some of the images that I've posted, and these natural systems that are very obviously working, but actually we're working in organizations, we're working in people systems. That is also a natural system. It might be a bit dysfunctional, but it is also a natural system. So when we think about bringing what we know back in, and the point of that practice is bringing it back into organizations, it's that we can sense better what's going on. It's that we can be aware of our intense interconnectedness in a large consultancy in Canary Wharf. We're all having an impact on each other. We're all seeding the culture. We're all making a contribution or not. We're all opening things up or closing them down. This is the stuff of natural systems. And
Mm.
if we can change our state and our orientation to things in our time outside, we bring that change back into the work we do and into the ways we see things in the work we do. So potentially we're standing out and we can have greater impact in those systems from that practice.
That is so powerful. And I don't know about you, but I do use those very basic constellations in my coaching work. And, just sitting at, now it all feels quite two dimensional, but just sitting at a screen and having some objects to move around is really powerful. And it helps people just get out of their current perspective and into another. And you've just made me remember how powerful being out in nature can be for that switch as well, and that feeling that we're part of systems. And it's so easy to sort of individualize and over personalize, isn't it? And actually using that time to let go of some of that and integrate ourselves, or remind ourselves of how integrated we are, is, I think that's going to be another thing that I do consciously as part of my airplane mode time. I think that will be really valuable. And it links into some of the previous episodes because I've talked about organizational systems. And a lot of us as coaches, especially if we're working with organizations, we are doing systemic work, because otherwise we're working in isolation and just sort of in a box. But we want to be able to work with part of the system. So I think that's a really great connection, and just nice to think that you can physically experience that rather than just going on a mental shift. You can actually go out and physically experience that. Very powerful. Thank you.
Exactly. So if you're thinking about your desktop constellation, what we're describing here is the possibility that you become, that moment where you know where to put one of those desktop pieces in when you're working a constellation. What we're talking about here is, as human beings in this world, is we become that thing that knows where to move. We're part of that moving system, and we're just really, really tuning into it for ourselves,
Yeah.
and developing that as a skill for ourselves, but also as an orientation to the work, that experience.
Yeah.
Oh, so exciting.
Yeah, it really is. And you're making me also think about intuition, which I don't know how your relationship with your intuition, but I notice that sometimes when I get really busy and really focused, I can start to sort of completely forget about my intuition. And I just wanted to think about intuition in the context of outdoor intelligence, and try and make that connection there. And any thoughts on the connection there, and that you've experienced or noticed amongst others?
It just is pure gold, deep vein intuition. I mean, that's what arises from that experience. And I've been in practice for quite a long time now, and what I'm starting to experience is that when I start to do something that cuts across my intuition, those moments where we have a
Mm.
choice and we sort of think, oh God, I could do that. I
Mm.
actually can't do it anymore. I start to feel physically really, really uncomfortable and a bit unwell. I can't do it. So there we are.
Do you think that there are any practices that we can start to adopt, like simple things? So let's say I've gone and had some time in airplane mode, and I come back and it's almost like, when people say, oh, write down your dreams and when you wake up in the morning. Do you think that there is a useful practice, or have you ever done anything like that? Like just come home and jot down anything that your intuition told you today. So for those of us perhaps that want to reconnect a little bit more with our intuition through this outdoor intelligence experience.
Yeah, three practices. I mean, the first one is, if you've got a pressing issue you know is really important to you, make a question out of it, write it on a bit of paper and stick it in your back pocket before you go out for a walk. The second one is, sometimes I get really strong stuff coming to me when I walk. Our phone on airplane mode can capture an audio note really quickly. That's a possibility. But also, either when we're out taking a seat and just doing a bit of writing, or doing it when we come home. Yes, get it down. It depends how spacious your life is as to whether you need to write that down. But what I'm guessing is that a lot of your listeners will need to capture the nuggets as they come up when they start going into practice. But you know what, Maya? Why should anyone believe either of us saying this? The only way to start to get into this practice is to have your own experience of it. And I have that there are three things that really help people to develop this. One is to get real value out of the practice, to realize how it's really supporting their work, for it to be a delightful experience, one that is intrinsically pleasurable in whatever way that happens for you. And the third is that it becomes a habit. So, like our guy who was going to the tube station, find a bit of the day or find a way of latching it on to something else you do and just make it a habit so you're not even thinking about it. It's just like, that's what I do then.
Yeah. I love that. This idea of writing down a question, again, I think is very, I like it because it's simple. It feels, for those of us that feel like we might want to be productive, it feels like it's productive. It also makes me think of Cal Newport, because I don't know if you've come across what he writes about, but he talks about these walking meditations, and he's very clear in making sure that these are not they're not exercise. It's not a form of exercise. He's walking quite slowly. I think he's quite deliberate about having a problem, and like an actual Komsky problem set or something that he's solving, and he uses the walks to help him make sense of that. And I think that's really powerful. And I think he talks about spending hours and hours like that. So he's obviously got. I'm joking because he doesn't really have the luxury of time. He's very good about his time use, but he's definitely cultivated that practice and has built that in. I don't know how much the nature piece is important, because I think he would do it on any street, which is why I do think there is a bit of a deconstruction here between the walking element and then the other beautiful parts of nature. The two kind of almost interact with outdoor intelligence, don't they? And even if we can get one or the other, it's not a bad thing.
Absolutely. It's like an equation. Nature plus walking equals actually deep work, Cal Newport's phrase. But, it does really, it's a really powerful combination. And we take one if we can't get the other, right?
Have you just come up with that, or is that something that you have shared?
It just came to me in the moment. Look, I had a good walk this morning. I'm on my edge. It's fine. It takes me there. Here it is. Whoa,
Perfect.
Hi.
Perfect. Well, I think that is a beautiful visual for this podcast episode, that equation, because that it sums it up for those of us that like to be able to see how all these things interact and make sense of them. Maybe we can add in intuition there as well, sort of multiplied by intuition or something like that as well, because I do think the intuition piece is important. And like I said, one can get disconnected from one's intuition, right? In the busyness of daily life. And to think that, your walk, for me, I think the walk gives exercise. I think it gives space, energy, opportunity to, engage with different forms of content. But if I could also think it helps me reconnect with the system that I'm part of, reconnect with my intuition, mull over some questions, to me that is really powerful. And I can see then, as I was perhaps alluding to at the beginning, I can now see more of a pathway to how to access more outdoor intelligence. So that's really helpful. I'm happy to leave it there. Is there anything you wanted to add? Because it's been a fascinating conversation. Is there anything else?
I'm a constant improver, so I'm just still working on our equation. So I'm going nature plus walking equals intuition plus deep work.
Oh, brilliant. All right. Well, we will continue to improve on this equation. So it's been an absolute pleasure having you, Fi. And if our listeners want to find out more about outdoor intelligence, where should they go?
They can visit my website, wildleadership.co.uk, or connect with me on LinkedIn. And they can also listen to my podcast, Switched On! by Fi Macmillan, which is on Apple Podcasts and Spotify.
Fantastic. Thanks for listening, and see you next time.